My love for Sailor Moon has always made me feel conflicted for a reason that's always been hard to coherently put into words. There's a lot I wholeheartedly love about the series, but a lot of what I love is rooted in changes, mostly specific to an adaptation the creator doesn't fully agree with. It's hard to explain. I love aspects and versions of the franchise, but others, versions closer to or directly fitting the creator's actual vision, frustrate me at the absolute best. I started with the first episode of the 90s anime, enjoyed it, and continued like any normal person would. But while I enjoyed the early episodes, they have their own charm that stands out from the rest of the show. I feel like the show really starts to find its footing with episode 8 and the introduction of Ami. That's emphasized with the introduction of Rei in episode 10. However, in my attempts at reading the manga, ironically I always get the opposite feeling. I enjoy the first two chapters well enough, but after Rei's introduction, I lose interest, to the point where the later parts of the first arc were a slog to get through the first time I actually did. The manga isn't bad, and I certainly get and respect the appeal. A lot of people vastly prefer it, which I respect, but it focuses on different things compared to the anime, and has a lot of aspects I don't personally enjoy. I think the point the two truly diverge in different stories in my mind is at the exact same instance. The story following Rei's introduction. In the manga, it's Act 4, Masquerade, which wouldn't be adapted into the anime till around 10 episodes later. It's a fine chapter. The miracle romance aspect of Sailor Moon has never really appealed to me, and this is the point to me where it starts becoming clear that, in the manga at least, it's the main focus, and thus where I lose a lot of interest. In the anime, on the other hand, you get episode 11, Usagi vs. Rei, which is pure filler. But it was also the first where I really went, holy shit, I love this show and need to watch more, after my first viewing. To me, this seemingly insignificant filler episode is the most important one of the 90s Sailor Moon. For better or worse, depending on your preferences, it's the perfect embodiment of everything the 90s anime would become, at least to me. It's the first episode where Usagi has more than one other senshi to play off of. Before this, we'd only gotten 2 episodes of her with Ami, which I like a lot, as I've mentioned, and immediately here we get a dynamic between the 3 girls. Usagi and Rei butt heads, while Ami acts as a sort of sane man to the 2 of them. So when Ami inevitably gets trapped with the other victims of the episode, we see the 2 have to work together for the first time. It's really simple, but to me it's incredibly important in establishing the basis for Usagi and Rei's friendship. As I mentioned, in the manga the core focus is the miracle romance. However, in the anime, the core is instead the friendship of the inner senshi. In Classic in particular, I think they do an amazing job showing the group growing closer. By the time of episode 45, we've seen them become friends and how much they've come to mean to each other. Thus their deaths, and inevitably coming together to defeat Queen Beryl in the end, mean a ton. This is especially apparent with Usagi and Rei. In the beginning, they barely get along. They're polar opposites, but over time, they begin to understand each other more. Rei acts mean sometimes, but she really does come to care about Usagi, and comes to trust and respect her. Meanwhile, Usagi comes to appreciate Rei as a friend, and trust her as well. One of the biggest showcases of this is in the episode where the Inners pretend to have a falling out to lure out the villains. When she's attacked, we see Usagi trusted the Moonstick to Rei to keep it safe, not even having told the others. This pretty infamously got ruined in the Dick dub by changing it to Rei taking it, but in the original and the Viz dub, Usagi explicitly trusts it to her. It's a sweet dynamic and arc. They go from barely able to work together to absolutely inseparable. I'd argue it's the main through line of Classic even. At D-Point, Rei gets the most focus besides Usagi. The episode focuses on both their reactions to what's going on the most. We get to see how much they mean to each other before and after Rei's death. With Rei accepting her fate and trying to comfort Usagi because she wants to protect her, which she succeeds at. And ultimately, it's Rei who's able to get her to get back up in the end. Obviously, you could take this arc as shippy, and I mean, considering Ikuhara was responsible for a lot of this, there's a non-zero chance that was the intention. But even just taking it with what's presented as a friendship arc, their bond is really great. I've seen people compare their arc to sisters, with Usagi being the immature younger sister, and Rei being the more responsible older one who gets annoyed by Usagi, but at the end of the day deeply cares about her. I like that view as well. It adds a lot to Rei's last words being that Usagi was right about something she said earlier in the episode, basically saying she respects her and trusts her judgment as well. I really don't like the Rei and Mamoru romance stuff the anime does, but I think it also does service this arc well. They start pettily competing with each other over the same guy, and Rei is obviously crushed when she realizes it's fated not to be, but she handles it surprisingly maturely. In the skiing episode, one of my favorites, we get a sweet scene where Rei says she doesn't hold anything against Usagi and wants them to be happy together. However you read their dynamic, it's really great. Well, Rei is introduced in episode 10, and their dynamic starts getting set up at the end of that episode. I'd argue it's episode 11 where it's truly established. It's an episode the whole series builds off of. I truly think it's where the anime found its direction. Again, even outside of Rei and Usagi, the friendship of the girls is the main core of the 90s anime, and this is where it really starts getting explored. Alright, so there's an elephant in the room I haven't really talked about yet. All of this stuff I've talked about kind of hinges on the fact they almost completely changed Rei's personality for the anime. They isn't even the correct word. It's been confirmed by a lot of staff members that this change was entirely Ikuhara's doing. As I mentioned before, he's basically responsible for all of this existing. Apparently he wanted to make Rei more like his ideal girl. It's,
Moshi policeman.
Manga Rei is a fairly stoic character. She's a reserved girl who's an outcast because of her abilities. She's more of the mysterious, dark-haired girl archetype. In the anime, on the other hand, she's a tsundere. She's much more outgoing and loud. It's still implied she didn't have any close friends prior to the group, but she's still popular at her school relative to that. She's basically a completely different character, probably the most changed in the anime. I'd argue Chibiusa and Mamoru are at least similar to their manga parts. They're just used differently or worse. With Rei, it's understandably divisive. For one thing, a lot of people think she's too mean. I believe Takeuchi herself has said she thinks they kinda made her a jerk, and her voice actress was hesitant on the characterization as well, feeling like it made her too much of a joke. But ultimately, Ikuhara won out. None of this is helped by the fact that the Dika dub outright just made her a jerk, which hurts a lot of the perception of her. But regardless of the questionable motivation behind the changes to her character, I think it really was to the show's benefit. Again, like I've emphasized, the focus of the 90s anime is different than the manga, focusing more on the friendship of the girls. In the manga, Rei is a fairly passive character who falls mostly into the background. Not to say she doesn't get her moments, but like Ami and Makoto there, she's just kind of another character. The anime, on the other hand, needed a character like Rei. She pushes plots forward, creates conflict, and creates opportunity for development in the process. And episode 11 was the start of this. I realize in a video about the most important episode of Sailor Moon, I've barely talked about the actual episode in question, but I feel like what it started and its impact is what makes it so important. The episode itself is great, incredibly fun, and has some of my favorite gags in the whole show. Fucking Mamoru on the kitty train for no reason kills me. He didn't even know he's Tuxedo Mask at this point. He's just there with no explanation. The last scene in episode 10, which was original to that episode and not in the manga, implied the idea of Rei and Usagi not seeing eye to eye, but episode 11 is really what established it. And guess who directed it? Despite Ikuhara not becoming the series director until R, he directed a lot of episodes in the first season and had a lot of influence. His first episode was episode 6. His second, episode 11. The dynamic he created would go on to become important for the entire series. In the manga, Rei and Usagi barely interact. There's a scene or two where Rei criticizes her, but past her debut, their interactions are few and far between, with her role as the person or friend closest to Usagi usually being filled by Mamoru or Minago. However, in the anime, they're the closest friendship of the Senshi. All the way into Stars, even after Ukuhara left, we get things like Rei dogging in Usagi's arms, her being the first one Usagi talks to about Mamoru disappearing after she breaks down about it in front of Seiya, and we even get a moment where Michiru compares their relationship to her and Haruka's. Again, this is after Ikuhara left. Usagi and Rei's relationship, however you interpret it, is one of the most important 90s anime. It's also the one that made me fall in love with the show. Reigen and Usagi are my favorite characters, and their relationship, written as platonic or romantic, is my favorite in Sailor Moon. It, and the changes to Rei's characters that made it possible, are all rooted in episode 11. While I may be extremely biased in saying this, considering it's the episode that truly made me fall in love with the show, it's because of everything it set up that I believe it's the most important episode of Sailor Moon.